Wrestle Mania podcast. Today we are going to be reading the December 1999 issue. This is another in the family of Weston magazines. It's odd to see an older Weston magazine without Bill Apter's name in the mix, although the Taz Sabu cover photo is attributed to Apter. I like the setup here with their regular departments and their feature articles separated. Since there are articles that aren't getting covered each episode, after every 10 regular episodes, I'll do an episode going back and looking at some of the articles not covered. That way, you get to see a little more of the magazines. We can keep these episodes nice and short, and it gives you a little something different to look forward to every now and then. Now, speaking of something different, our first article up discusses Curt Hennig during his West Texas redneck gimmick. He was singing Rap is Crap and feuding with Conan and the No Limit Soldiers. This gimmick debuted earlier in '99 and was probably the only version of Curt Hennig that I wasn't a huge fan of, which is weird to me. The article puts over the gimmick as helping to save his career and possibly put him back into some kind of championship contention. The article pushes the idea that he may leave the group after getting a championship, but Barry Windham comes to his defense. I love how Barry says media types are always trying to bust up a good thing. Now, I'm going to keep this next section a little shorter because this article talks about Van Hammer making a comeback. I honestly didn't remember a Van Hammer comeback. I remember him early in WCW, and he was a decent mid-carder, but nothing special. The tone of this article is really trying to get you behind his comeback. I may have to watch some old matches and see if I'm missing something with this guy, but I really don't care, and I'll try not to let that attitude affect how I cover articles in the future. Now, this is an interesting idea I don't think I've ever seen before, a magazine inside of a magazine. Love that secondary title, Wrestle America's evil sister publication. It's interesting to see in this table of contents the articles that they include. Bad Guy Hall of Fame, Bad Guy Rankings, and 10 Questions with Billy Gunn, amongst others. Wrestling interviews are always interesting in magazines, so let's see what AEW star Billy Gunn had to say over 20 years ago. This interview was done after Billy won the 1999 King of the Ring. The header before the article says it's not like any interview you'll read any other wrestling magazine, it's better. First, I think they meant to say in any other wrestling magazine. Second, I find this interview a little bland. Maybe when it was printed it felt fresh, but reading it years later, I don't really get anything out of it, and I don't really know what it does to get you into his character. Now, the Brothers of Destruction are legendary now, but they weren't always a thing. This article was written when them teaming was a novel moment. It's funny to read the question of whether they can get it together long enough to win a tag team championship, since we now know they go on to win 3 tag team championships overall. I love going through old magazines because you know how the story plays out, but it's interesting to see the speculation and opinion of the time. Now, the next article up is definitely something of the time because this article details Steve Blackman's frustrations with watching others get ahead in the business while he's out injured. I didn't know Blackman started in 1986, contracted malaria and dysentery in 1989, and wasn't able to wrestle full-time until 1997. It describes how Blackman wants to defeat Shamrock to get ahead, but feels that they can still be friends. Remembering the style that these two had in the ring, those matches must have been something to see, and I will definitely have to go back and check them out. 1999 was such a wild time in wrestling, and the next article describes one of the bigger events of that time, and that is when ECW got the TNN TV deal. This deal made a lot of people look at ECW as being on the same level as WWF and WCW. It's such a sign of the times that it was placed in a block with Roller Jam, Championship Rodeo, and Demolition Derby. This was a time when there was such a hunger for wrestling programming. Now, the TNN president is quoted in this article estimating that the audience for wrestling is about 30 million. And if you remember the late 90s, that should not surprise you. Now, my favorite part of these episodes, you know, is covering the mailbag. The first letter is from a West Coast ECW fan. You see the enthusiasm of a fan that has only seen ECW on TV and can't wait for them to possibly do a show near him. Next letter is from a fan who was at first skeptical about Master P joining WCW, but later came to enjoy it. Being from New Orleans, I'm surprised they were skeptical of No Limit in WCW. The third letter is congratulating the Hardy Boys on their first tag team championship. Given their legendary status now, this is definitely a moment in time. The following letter talks about cliques and wrestling. The way the writer talks about cliques, I think they mean factions. The fifth letter up talks about Seiji Sakaguchi stepping down as president of New Japan Pro Wrestling and supporting new president Tatsumi Fujinami. The sixth letter criticizes Sting for not dealing with NWO Sting. And the last letter complains about only 3 superstars battling for the top spot. This is wild considering how we view Austin, The Rock, and The Undertaker now. But don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And next week we'll be covering the April 1992 issue of The Wrestler. Thank